Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, Mr. Yusuf. Basically, we'll be conducting this interview to get some insights from you in order to complete our leadership assignment. So our group is from the PIM 2017 batch, and we are representing the B1 subgroup. To start off our conversation, could you kindly give us a brief about your family and your education and your what sort of background you are from?
Thank you for the opportunity. I grew up in Sri Lanka and went to both St. Thomas's in the early days and then to Royal. And that, particularly Royal, was a great place to learn of books and learn of men, as we say in our college song. Took a lot of leadership roles in school, played a lot of sport, played squash for Sri Lanka junior team. Was very also yeah. And then in 1985, I went to the local University of Colombo and started my law degree there. But then after about a year, I felt it's better for me to go overseas and get some exposure overseas. So I went to England and I studied law there at the University of Essex. I did my barristers, came back, did my attorneys, worked briefly for a short time with a lawyer, but pretty soon came and joined Hemas. So I'm married to Avanti of about almost 23 years, and I've got two sons, 14 and 11-year-old boys. And that's one of the hardest things to manage, the boys.
That's true. So you said that you've done law as well, which many people probably might not know that about you. Yes. So did you do?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I also after about, like you all, after about 15 years of working, I went and did my MBA, which I found was really enjoyed it. It was really tough, but really enjoyed it.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
So we read that you got a business background as well as a law background.
That's right.
So we were wondering so you did law first, is it?
That's right. Yes.
And what made you change from law to business?
Well, the reason I did law was I thought at that time it was a cool thing to be a barrister. It was one of the hardest. You needed high marks to get into the law faculty. My dad did law. So the reasons were not that clear. I had my heroes were like people like Gandhi and Jinnah and all these political leaders, Lee Kuan Yew, all of them had done law. So yeah, it wasn't really just the idea of justice and watching Crown Court as a child on TV. That's what inspired me to do law. Then you kind of and then you kind of realize that maybe, I think it's a great academic qualification to have.
I suppose you always had business in your blood though, since...
Yes, exactly. Yeah. All the discussions on the family table were around business.
Always, yeah, right. Okay, so outside of your corporate life and all the office work, I'm sure you're a very busy man, but what do you indulge yourself in?
So I love reading. I read a lot. I read both fiction, non-fiction, and I try to exercise as much as I can. I enjoy it. I get out early in the morning and finish. I would either do circuit training, running, swimming. I used to do bicycling, but my wife has put a stop to that. So that's I try and do as much of that as possible, even weekdays, weekends, almost every day. And then I would try and do sport with my kids as well. And I have an active social life as well. So I have various groups of friends, some around reading, some around parenting, and some around traveling. But I have a fairly active social life as well.
So I'd say that's a very busy and balanced life that you maintain.
Try to, yes.
Yeah.
So despite this busy lifestyle of yours, I'm sure you are a very successful businessman and you have been working in Hemas for quite a long time. So what do you think that the three pillars of success in your life, maybe from the corporate aspect, or also in your personal life?
So I was firstly, a lot of it is to do with luck, I think. I was sort of lucky to be born into the right family at the right time and join the company at the right time. And I had some great leaders at Hemas that I learned from and that I could try and contribute towards this company. Yeah, and I've made lots of mistakes and lots of errors. So the first thing is, I think, learn from your mistakes and errors. That's probably one big pillar. Some of the businesses I was in wasn't that successful. So you learn a lot from those experiences. But I took early responsibility from a very young age. I had major responsibility. I was like leading companies and going into new areas, and you have to learn really fast, because suddenly you find 1,000 people are, you're responsible for their lives, so you better learn, because they're looking at you and you have to make sure their payroll, every month the salary can be paid and the business can generate so much. So that's, I think, one thing is to take whatever responsibility you're given early and do it to the best of your ability, and then learn fast, learn actively, proactively. So be very curious. Whatever I did, I tried to read a lot, I tried to meet the best in the industry, and learn from them. I would travel overseas and see companies involved in this. I had an insatiable appetite and hunger to learn about everything, and I find that even when I talk to people, I try to ask the right questions. And
so to always keep learning new things.
Exactly. So that was another pillar I would have thought. And then third pillar is, I suppose you need to build a lot of resilience in you. So in business there are a lot of failures. So combination of humility and learn to fail and I guess come in and do a good honest day's work. Right. Be a little bit methodical, be systematic, try and every day do a few things to further the big agenda. Sometimes you get caught up with lots of small things, and I was guilty of that as well. But every day, if you can spend even like half an hour, 1 hour pursuing the big things that you want to do for your organization, for your department, over time, those small things really
fall into place.
Produce great results.
Right, thank you very much for that. That's great advice. I think we can all use that.
Yeah, so you were talking about being resilient as one of your success pillars. So we know that pharmaceutical industry is a very high competitive industry in Sri Lanka. What sort of strategies have you implemented to take Hemas to the top?
And we know that recently the Sri Lankan government imposed price cuts on pharmaceutical items. And how did you face such challenges, and how do you in general face such challenges? And
so if you take our pharma business, it's almost a 69-year-old business with great manufacturing business partners, principals that we've nurtured over the years and built trust and delivered results for them. So that is it's a great foundation we're on. We've always recruited great people, good leaders, good business heads who run that business. We have great boards, which I'll talk to you about later. So it's been the high level of professionalization. Many in the industry haven't professionalized to the extent I think that we have, and by that I mean hiring great people, investing in, especially in information technology. investing in great warehousing processes. Spent years developing processes, getting young blood into the business and helping them to succeed. And we learned a lot from our principals, from the manufacturers that we represent. The price cuts have been very challenging. So the few ways to cope with that is that so we try to have a constructive dialogue with the regulator and try to, I suppose, help them to make the best decisions. It's not easy to make these decisions as to what price a pharmaceutical should be. It involves complex understanding of pharmacoeconomics.
That's right.
So not we hope the regulator has taken all of that into account. I think to some extent, there was a need for some kind of what's the word? So for many years there was a pricing formula which was in place, which was a good thing. But then over the years that was not implemented, and then things got a bit out of control. So there's a need to bring some order and discipline and control around pricing of pharmaceuticals, because ultimately we all want people of Sri Lanka to have good quality drugs at an affordable price. It's good for business, it's good for the patients as well. So the way we are coping with this is, in addition to having a constructive dialogue with the regulators, is to somehow look at our costs and find ways of reducing inventory, reducing working capital, reducing we have a sort of actually hiring freeze. We try to watch our head count. We are growing in new markets also. We set up a pharmaceutical distribution business in Myanmar. We're looking at some other markets as well, and also trying to grow the top line. So we are constantly trying to distribute for more other manufacturers by really trying to be really good at what we do and try to be competitive. So you grow the top line, and that way you can, and that's because we have a critical mass, we can perhaps cope to some extent with this issue more than maybe the smaller distributors can, because the other big thing that we're doing is investing in local manufacturing, because the government really, that's their ultimate aim, is to try and produce more drugs locally. So we are building a new world-class factory at Morrison's that will be open soon in Homakama. We have upgraded our plant in Mutwal, and the government, with the buyback agreement, have been buying more and more from us. And so we try to, ultimately we have to sort of optimize the supply chain, whether by locally manufacturing or by importing, to make sure that the most sort of optimum combination of drugs come in to the country.
That's right. You mentioned that you have expanded outside of Sri Lanka as well. And what are the challenges you perceived that you would have to face when you expanded out of Sri Lanka? And what was the reality like?
So the areas that we've been a bit more successful is particularly in our personal care FMCG business, where we have over the last 10 years developed a reasonable sized business in Bangladesh, selling Kumarika hair oil and now soap and face wash. And then to a lesser extent, we have expanded pharmaceutical distribution in Myanmar. I think with our Bangladesh experience, the key thing is to find the right set of leaders who will grow the business, who know the local market, who can take the best out of what we have here and then modify it and adapt it to Bangladesh. Many years of patient investment We started off by just, people from here going there and trying to find distributors to carry our products. And until you get to a reasonable scale, it's very difficult to really invest a lot behind the brand and invest in your own sales force, which now we have done. But it's been, now looking back, thank God we did it, because it's a very attractive market. So finding the right partners, figuring out which product works. Not all our products will work in Bangladesh. And having the resilience, the patience, the money to go through the first 5-6 years where we lost a lot of money, or where we lost money, which we've now since recouped. Myanmar is also finding the right partner. We think we're a decent partner. And interestingly, both in Bangladesh and in Myanmar, it was pleasantly surprising to find out that they knew about Hemas and they knew about the quality of this company. So news gets around. If you do something well in your home market, then it's easy to go to those markets and attract the right talent. Otherwise, why would anyone join some unknown company?
I guess being one of the top brands help when you expand outside as well.
Yes, and the fact that if you're a reasonably sized company and a good brand in Sri Lanka, they give you recognition for that in countries like Bangladesh and Myanmar.
Right.
So Mr. Yusufal, as per your view, what do you think the difference is between managing and leading? And also, you mentioned that Gandhi was one of the leading leaders, as to what you were looking for. So, is there any particular leadership style you follow, or what sort of idea you have about that?
So that's a great question. I mean, Gandhi himself was one of the most successful leaders without a title, without any formal authority. He led by his convictions, his sacrifices, and his own contribution to, at that time, getting freedom from the British. So yeah, he's a great idol. I have a picture of him on my desk always. So what I have come to sort of learn and realize is that leadership is actually actions and behaviors, and everyone can be a leader, and everyone should strive to be a leader in their area. It's mostly about trying to figure out what direction one should go, what we should be doing, and management is more about how we do it right, and management is perhaps a bit more about doing things well and implementing and developing processes. So there's room for both. Both are needed in a company. You need managers, you need leaders. But the key thing is to recognize in any situation that if you listen to your inner voice, you may be able to lead in a particular situation even though you haven't got any formal authority. Because sometimes it's about cheering up the people around you, it's about arguing, and it's about going against the tide. It's about actually standing up and saying, no, I think this is wrong, when that's not the popular thing to do. And it's about doing a good day's work and earning the respect of your colleagues. And it's really about serving your team for them to do their best. So whenever I have leadership of a team, my main thing is, look, what can I do to make you do better? Most of the time, the obstacles are at the top, and we don't bring out the best. I think 95% of the people who are in employment want to do a good job. It's just giving them the resources, giving them the training, giving them the belief that they can actually do it, and then trying to make sure that they get the credit but as a leader you have to take the blame when things go wrong. So that's something I try to keep in mind. I try to make sure at least the credit always goes to the people who are doing things. So there's a real need to, we are always looking for some person with formal authority. Particularly I notice in Sri Lanka, everybody is looking up to the, and people generally with big titles and formal authority sometimes are constrained to do things that are needed sometimes for the customer. Sometimes you have to, you need to shake up everything in an organization, and sometimes the higher you go sometimes and the older you get in life, you don't want to take risks. So you want to just preserve what you have, rather than sometimes you have to, I think, rethink what you've done. And sometimes younger people are better able to do that and relate to the new younger consumer. So a lot about leadership is really learning and listening to the front line. If ever I was running a business hands-on, I used to spend a lot of time talking to the people who are dealing with customers, especially in the service industry, to really keep your ear to the ground of the customer.
So I guess what really makes a difference from a leader and a manager is how you interact with your employees and how you empower them, and that's basically what defines you as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, I think both have to interact well with their teams and employees. But sometimes a leader would throw questions at the team, whereas managers are expected to throw the answers.
Okay.
But sometimes we have to step back and ask, what we are spending our time this next month, is this what we should be doing or something else? So that's sometimes to pause and ask that question from your own team is an act of leadership, I think. And there are many opportunities where all of us can lead by and just by being really on top of what's going on in your industry and really seeing what changes are happening outside. I think managers spend far too much time within an organization. I think managers and leaders should spend far more time outside the organization, interacting with what's out there and seeing what's happening, what changes are taking place, talking to customers, talking to employees at the shop floor level, and really tuning into what is going on, because it's so easy to huddle around each other and pat each other on the back and say we're doing everything well, and then suddenly wake up to find a competitor has taken all your share.
Yes. So Mr. Yusuf Ali, what are the attributes you look for when recruiting new employees to Hemas?
Right. So it depends at what level, but if it's a leadership position, the very quick thing I remember is what Jack Welch talks about, the 4 E's. So I look for whether the person has energy, whether he or she can energize others, whether he or she can execute well, and whether this person has the edge to make decisions without all the information available. So that's one checklist I use. The other checklist I use is I look at a person's personal resilience, the ability to learn, the ability to be emotionally strong. Has this person played leadership roles in school or in their life? Then I look at interpersonal skills. How can this person get along with others? How can he inspire other people? How can this person try to listen to other people? How can they operate in a team? And the third one would be like the strategic understanding of an industry, and how they could play, and how can they drive performance in a large organization. So at leadership levels, I look at that. But if it's a general executive, I mostly look to see the fire in the belly. They say hire for attitude and train for skill. That's something I like to try and follow.
Okay. As you say, working with your frontline staff is very important. And how do you create strong relationships with your employees in general?
So I think the big thing is to build trust. I think that's the big thing, and that can only happen by honoring your promises. So if you tell an employee you will do something, then I try very hard to follow through, or tell that person why I couldn't do it.
Okay.
Otherwise you quickly lose trust and credibility. So very early on in my career, I listened to a talk, I remember, by one Mr. C.P. De Silva, who was the then chairman of 18 Spence, and he said the only thing you have in your corporate life is credibility. So preserve that. So your question was really how do I interact with employees,
yes.
right? So deliver on promises. Secondly, try and listen as much as possible to employees, because most of the time they know the right answer. As the higher you go up, you sometimes can't see things as clearly. You can't see what the customer is thinking. So try to create opportunities to interact also in a bit, not only formal ways but informal ways.
Okay.
So if I'm running a business, I would very much have quarterly town hall so that I can tell people what's going on in the business. We try to be transparent as possible at Hemas. We try and tell them this is what's happening, this is where the competition is. Because what they say is that what I believe is if every employee has the same information that you have as like an MD, and if the incentives also somewhat align, they will behave exactly the way
you want them to.
You will behave. Most of the time they don't have access to the information of what's happening in the company. Most companies say like it's a need to know basis. That person should, why should he know this person? Why should the marketing person know what is happening in accounting? But it's absolutely crucial to share information. I like to just sit down sometimes and I'm also very curious about people. I love to know what makes people tick. I'm actually very interested in getting to meet people, talking to them, not just about work but about their life. I learned so much from talking to people. Everybody I can learn something. Even the tea lady I can learn something if I really listen to what she says. And I enjoy it. I enjoy learning from each other, and I enjoy interacting. I like to know about that. And I see that the fundamental job of a leader is to make sure that their lives are a little bit better because of you.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, so along with what you just explained to us, I'm sure you have gained a lot of experience over the past years. So what do you think that you could have done differently, or if you have done any mistakes, like you gave us an advice to learn from your mistakes, basically. So do you think that you could have done things differently considering your past experience and all?
I should be more optimistic. So my default position is I always see the risks and I always see what can go wrong, but you have to, you can't be starry-eyed about the future, but you have to be able to balance that, to have that. So I think if I look back, I should be a little more positive, a little more, and that little bit more confident. Sometimes you have to be positive and confident, and things will work out. If you do honest, hard day's work, things will work out. That's one thing. The second thing is never neglect your health. There was a period in my life I did neglect it, and I paid for it in terms of that time even my performance reduced. So I learned, do not ever compromise things like exercise and good health and eating and all of that. And thirdly, I would have had a bit more fun and enjoyment. I think I was a bit too serious, and it's nice to have. Sometimes it's said that you need to be first successful before you can be happy. But there's a lot of literature which now says first be happy, and success will follow.
That's
and
right.
That's something I try to. I would tell people, and to learn from that mistake that I made.
So in general, if you think about the role of the role what the government plays, do you think, like as per your view, do you think that we have enough maybe infrastructure facilities, or in other words, what sort of support do you think we need to develop a more good business environment so that we can have more business or like more leaders in our country?
Sure. So, firstly, consistent policies. It's extremely important that for businesses who want to come to Sri Lanka, policies should not be changing very often. Tax policies or rules and regulations should remain as consistent as possible. Secondly, corruption is something that should be all have to work very hard to get rid of that, because there's a high cost to finally the public and the consumer because of corruption. Every business, if they're having to spend on corruption, then there's a cost to the consumer who finally ends up paying for it. And thirdly, skilled employees in the industries that will grow in Sri Lanka. So the growing industries are things like IT, all service industries, tourism, logistics. These are sort of new. These are the industries but we are desperately short of skilled people who want to get into those jobs also and build careers in those industries. So too many tricycle drivers, too many people in unproductive government jobs, which actually distort the whole labor market, because government can pay very high. They end up sometimes paying very high salaries for less work, and people get attracted by the security of that, and that really makes it uncompetitive for business. So that's really important that government has to be very careful in recruitment. But there's the government has been doing a lot of work in improving the infrastructure. It's come a long way. Our power costs are very high, and so manufacturing. That's a concern for manufacturing. So, we have to, because with trade barriers opening, if we are having much higher cost of production because of power, it's hard then to compete with countries like China and India. And I think work more as public-private partnerships with the private sector, because the private sector has certain. They have the capital, they have the maybe the dynamism, the management, the agility. They can move fast. They can get international partners, because even this for indirect investment, it's easier for companies like us to attract companies than the government trying to attract a company to come here. When a company is looking to come to Sri Lanka, they are looking at the business environment and who their business partners are, who they can work with. So try to practically work much more with the private sector to provide better infrastructure. There's so much more that can be done. There's a much better spirit of partnership.
So personally also, do you find any mechanism to develop the future leaders here at Hemas?
Yes, we do many things. So one of the things we do is that we do a formal an assessment of potential, and we review performance of perhaps almost 100 to 150 young leaders in the group. And then about 35 of them get sent to the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore for an intensive, mini kind of MBA program, and then they are given projects to do, and then we track we track these people's careers. We try to make sure they're given different roles, more challenging roles, and then try to build leaders from within there. We take every year, every few years, a batch of management trainees. We take interns to get fresh young blood into the organization, and every quarter, many of our businesses will be reviewing talent for potential and performance and their development plans. So most of us would have some development plan. One of the things we do to develop leaders is move people around. A lot of leaders are moved around, including myself, and that is very good for both new ideas and for people to develop as leaders. We try and do many things to improve people's self-awareness, because through self-awareness only you can start to improve yourself. And we teach our leaders the science of energy management, and we teach our employees more about how to be healthier.
So, Mr. Yusuf, you're heading such a large conglomerate, and I'm sure you played many different roles throughout your years here, and you have more than 25 years of experience in the field. So what would be your advice to young business leaders?
Okay, so I don't head this conglomerate. I play some leadership role in certain places in the organization. But for young people, I would say, firstly, keep learning. The world is changing so much that many jobs are becoming redundant, less important. You won't get paid quite the same amount, because with technology these jobs are getting de-skilled.
That's right. So
learn new skills, be flexible too. Don't be set in what you want to do. Try and figure out how, what your strengths are, and try and leverage those strengths. Especially when you're young, try different businesses, different industries, because you need to know what you don't like. Thirdly, look after your health, and stay fit, because you need a lot of physical stamina to operate in today's corporate world. And fourthly, build your networks by helping other people. Within your organization, try to see where you can help other people, and network outside as well. Try to find mentors, try to find the best in your industry, go and learn from them, and contribute to your society outside. Try and join a voluntary organization, try and do some community service around, whether it's your church or your local Rotary Club or whatever. Try to contribute in some way and get another dimension of leadership and the life. Don't just be stuck in your small little department and talk to the same people all the time. You won't get fresh ideas, you won't get fresh insights.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity, and it's been an honor talking to you.